What's up, guys? Today I'll be breaking down and reviewing the exotic fusion rifle in Destiny called Telesto. This weapon has a chance to drop in the Taken King raid. It can be delivered from Xur. It can drop from legendary or exotic Ingrams using the 3 of coins, which is actually how I got mine. Statistically, let's start off by breaking it down. It starts with a 290 base damage if you get it on a drop. You can infuse it higher, of course. The fire rate's 37%, it has an impact rating of 71, a range of 35, a stability rating of 82, and a reload percentage of 79. Starting magazine size starts at 4, but that can increase as well. So on preliminary look at least, the impact, the reload, and stability all stand out as fantastic numbers for a fusion rifle. The range being the middle of the pack stat, a bit on the low side, which is the only real negative. Otherwise, it's very balanced, very strong, especially in the stability and reload categories. Of note for this weapon, if you've played Halo, this thing has a very similar feel to the Needler. The fusion bolts do low impact on impact, like the damage is low, and compared to other fusion rifles, that's actually the opposite. But what's unique about this weapon is each of those bolts stick to the enemy and explode. It also feels kind of similar to the Scorch Cannon dropped by the captains in the House of Wolves DLC, where you can stick them and they explode, except the delay's not that long. And I'll break down the pros and cons of this sort of style of weapon shortly. In PvP, it's very different than other fusion rifles. Most one hit in short to medium range, but this weapon doesn't. It usually, in my experiences playing, requires at least 2 bursts to kill because of the delayed explosion. But I've noticed it does tend to perform better at extended ranges than other fusion rifles do as a result, meaning as much as it's going to take 2 hits to kill people at further ranges, it does actually, instead of requiring 3, it only takes 2 because of the explosion. But I'll get to the pros and cons of that in a minute. With regard to the skill tree, all Telestos are the same, of course, because they're exotics and they all deal void damage. You have an always active perk called Unplanned Reprieve, which causes all bolts fired to stick and explode, as I discussed earlier on short delay. You have 3 clear options in terms of scopes. Smart Drift Control, which produces predictable and controllable recoil at a slight cut to range. CQB Ballistics, which greatly reduces recoil but dramatically cuts into that range. And lastly, Smooth Ballistics, which boosts range but also increases recoil. I can make a case for both smart drift control and predictable recoil produced as a result, but I can also choose smart ballistics because recoil isn't significant anyway using this weapon with just about anything, and you get a good range buff associated with it. But if you can manage the recoil, and believe me, there isn't much, choose smooth ballistics because you get the best of all worlds. When breaking down the skill tree, the first perk is called Battle Runner, which boosts your character's top speed after getting a kill. This helps most in higher level content, especially void buff nightfalls. Hit quickly, retreat, relocate. It allows you to move faster. It helps for the same reasons in the Crucible if you choose to use it there. The next 3 perks which you'll have a choice over are Lightweight, which dramatically buffs agility and synergizes well with Battle Runner and gives you a sort of hint at the playstyle suggested using this weapon. Enhanced Battery, which increases the magazine size from 4 to 5, and lastly Flared Magwell, which increases reload speed. Again, you can make a case for any of the above 3. A more quicker pace and play style, for example in the Crucible or when you're trying to speed run missions, can be benefited with Lightweight. But if you're choosing a more cerebral, slower, deliberate style, like for example in Nightfalls, you could probably be benefited by that extra shot or a faster reload. The choice, of course, is going to depend on how fast you want your style to be. The last keystone perk of this weapon is called Harbinger's Spark, which allows for multi-kills to spawn orbs for your allies. And against Trash Mob, especially when Void is buffed, this thing makes enough orbs to really start generating supers and then continue the train. Because one teammate makes a super, spawns orbs, and the process continues. It's an extremely selfless perk overall that benefits the entire team, but isn't really too useful on your own, so bear that in mind. With regard to my overall impressions in PvE, I really like the weapon. As stated a few times, it not only kills enemies on void buffs, it absolutely melts them and causes anything around them to explode in spectacular fashion. It generates tons of orbs in the process as well. It's less significant outside of those buffs, as only the lowest of the low, like the Thralls, will get killed in that somewhat small blast radius that it has. but you can shoot quick to keep the explosion chains running. The quick fire rate means you can provide quick follow-up shots against tougher enemies as well, keeping them staggered, and continued DPS. The delay for the explosions is what makes this weapon unique, but what can also cause frustration as enemies seek cover after the initial explosion doesn't kill them, or they kamikaze rush you like to try and take care of you as quick as possible. So you have to monitor and adapt to this delay as well as monitor your range. If you want something dead as quickly as possible, this might not be a weapon outside of void buffs worth the exotic slot to you, even though I would call this gun probably one of the most fun weapons to use in the entire game. In the Crucible, I wouldn't recommend it as a regular weapon. I'm more partial to shotguns for closer range and snipers for longer range, which leaves fusion rifles as a whole a middleman option. But if I was to use fusion rifles in the Crucible for that medium range, this would not be the one I choose. The delay in the explosions gets you killed more often than it's useful, because sure, 2 low enemies bunched up together will die in one shot because the explosion will take out both of them, but that doesn't happen very often against better players and doesn't happen a lot to begin with anyway. It also usually allows 2 burst explosions to kill, so many players just rush you with a high range shotgun when they have low health between shots and just immediately shoot you to death. It doesn't do enough damage quickly enough to be a weapon I'd consider worthy of, especially an exotic slot in the Crucible. Overall, to sum up, I do find it one of the more fun weapons in the game, and compared with a good team in PvE, it can be an orb-generating, trash mob slaughtering machine, and it's so much fun to use. It has its niche, and it really does excel in it, but it's not a jack-of-all-trades, take-everywhere, excel-in-every-scenario weapon. Especially in the Crucible, leave it out of the Crucible. That's it. See you later.